Well, the Apostle Paul has a testimony, and it is a testimony where one can clearly see a difference in his life. He lived one way, but then after he was saved, he lived a totally different way. And you can see that difference plainly in Scripture. And in Acts chapter 22, Paul shares his testimony. And I want to read part of that testimony to you. I want to read Acts 22, verse 1 through 5, and then skip and read verse 14 and 15. So Acts 22, verse 1 through 5. Brothers and fathers, listen now to my defense before you. When they heard that he was addressing them in Aramaic, they became even quieter. He continued, I am a Jew, born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but I brought up in this city, educated at the feet of Gamaliel. According to the strictness of our ancestral law, I was zealous for God, just as all of you are today. I persecuted this way to death, arresting and putting both men and women in jail. As both the high priest and the whole council of elders can testify about me. After I received letters from them to the brothers, I traveled to Damascus to arrest those who were there and bring them to Jerusalem to be punished. Verse 14 and 15. And he said, the God of our ancestors has appointed you to know his will, to see the righteous one, and to hear the words from his mouth, since you will all be witnesses for him, since you will be a witness for him to all people of what you have seen and heard. And so what we see here is an example of a Christian's testimony. In verse 1 through 5, we see Paul's life before he was saved. He persecuted the church, even stood over Stephen when he was being killed. And so we see his life before Christ. And then in verse 6 through 13, we see his salvation experience, how he was on the road to Damascus and the Lord blinded him and called out to him and saved him there in Damascus. And then afterwards, we see what his life was like after salvation in verse 14 through 21, that he was saved to be an apostle to the Gentiles, and he would go and share the gospel of Jesus Christ. He went from one persecuting the church to planting churches and preaching the gospel so that others could be saved. And that shows us the testimony that we should all have, what our life was like before Christ, what our salvation experience was, and what our life has been after Christ, after salvation, and that should be a change. And so if you are a Christian, you have a testimony to share, and be challenged to share that testimony. I would say do it in 2 or 3 minutes because people's attention spans. Figure out a way to share it just like that. What was your life before salvation? What was your salvation experience? And what has been your life after you had been saved?